You're listening to the MindPod Network. Please consider supporting the It's All Happening podcast by going to zachlarry.com and using the Amazon portal to buy your stuff. It's all happening. 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 It's all Hello, friends. Welcome to the podcast, episode 125 of the It's All Happening with Zach Larry podcast. That's me. I'm your host. Here we are. Sorry, listeners, for the delay in getting a new episode out, but you'll be glad that you waited this long for this one. We have a very, very special episode of the podcast this week. Episode 125 was recorded live at Bhakti Fest out in Joshua Tree last week, and it was in a panel format with Shiva Rea, Uttal, and Deepak Chopra. Very, very cool. And listeners of this show know that Deepak Chopra was on the podcast a couple months ago, and Uttal was also on several months ago. But first time we've ever had Shiva Rea on, who is one of the most legendary yoga teachers in the Western modality. So very, very exciting stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot. So we'll get into the panel in just a little bit. But, you know, as I was crafting this intro, I had a kind of a specific topic that was not related to yoga or spirituality or anything like that. We're going to talk a little bit about technology, but something has happened in the ocean of the yoga world as it relates to Bhakti Fest. Now, I know many of you who listen to this show know nothing about Bhakti Fest. Maybe you've never even been or heard of it. It is a yoga festival that takes place out in the desert once a year, then has its sister festival called Shakti Fest, which takes place in the other half of the year. So twice a year, thousands of people gather in the desert to practice yoga, sing kirtan, and listen to lectures and do workshops that can aid in their spiritual development. And I'm not going to specifically address any controversy or talk about anything that's happened, because that's not important. But it is important to mention this. To immediately mention controversy and then to say not what the controversy is, I realize is a little anticlimactic. But we did want to bring attention, or I wanted to bring attention to something specific that has influenced Bhakti Fest, but it's a much larger issue that has influenced many, many spiritual traditions and the overall application and practice of Eastern spirituality in the Western modality. Now, Bhakti Fest has gone on for 10 years, pretty much without any hiccups. Of course, there are artists here and there who cannot work out their business arrangements with the leaders of Bhakti Fest, and that is just nature of the beast for anything that has to do with money. There are also negotiations that go on that people sometimes just can't work out. But because Bhakti Fest is a yoga festival, that implies that there is some form of spirituality involved with that. And as any student of comparative religion knows, that as the years go on, as people get more and more into a specific lineage or sect of spirituality, they start to have very firm opinions about how it should be practiced and how it shouldn't be practiced. We all can open up any newspaper any of the day of the week see this going on. We can see radical forms of Islam, extremist forms of Christianity taking hold in the fabric of our daily lives, which of course causes schisms in the matrix and countries to go at war with each other. But here in the United States, when a yoga festival gathers and extreme forms of bhakti yoga make their way into the fold here, and religion and dogma starts rearing its ugly head, I should say, things get very, very, very messy. There's been all sorts of talk about how and why the promoters and the leaders of Bhakti Fest are not doing it the right way, and they are embodying some form of white privilege and alienating the cultural authenticity of the Indian roots of Bhakti yoga as it's practiced, halfway across the world, and thus it's become a colonized, white man's festival that's bastardizing a sacred Indian culture, for whatever reason, and you can write a whole text on this. And while white privilege is an important issue that should be discussed, and cultural appropriation is, to be honest, and you want to write me hate emails, I think it's a medium-sized issue that should be discussed. We have to keep in mind that America is the land of cultural appropriation. There are very few things in the world in America that are uniquely American. I think the only people you can ask are Native Americans. Otherwise, America is the melting pot. This is where we gather to take other cultures and other ideologies and throw them into a blender and then create kind of this hybrid form of all sorts of cultures and foods and spiritual practices and music and art and literature, and the list goes on and on and on. Nothing is truly unique. So getting into a superiority complex about how yoga must be practiced, and saying that the cultural appropriation of yoga is a very, very serious offense, and then in order to remedy that, you must change your festival and do it this way, is really just dogmatic nonsense. It just is, because nobody's right and nobody's wrong. The middle path is always the wise path, and to cause these schisms of separation is really just a destructive force in the universe. Yoga is about unity. It's about the yoke, which means to unify. And when these topics get brought to the forefront and start taking down a beautiful institution that is Bhakti Fest, who, keep in mind, its only mission is to bring people out together in the desert from no tradition or no sect, and to get them out there doing yoga, doing kirtans, singing mantras, listening to philosophy, and to hang out and gather. That's the only mission. It's that simple. There is no dogma involved here. So when you start injecting that and poisoning the well, all you're doing is causing separation. That's the end of the rant. Let's not call out any names. We're going to listen to this panel in a minute, but remember that as we move forward into additional Bhakti Fests. Okay, friends. Well, that was that. We're going to get into the panel now. Shiva Rea, Uttal, Deepak Chopra. I'm not going to give bios for every single person here, the three of these people here. It was recorded in the panel format. The questions were submitted by audience members in advance over social media. Quite honestly, I did massage the questions a little bit and kind of made them into a flow. So you'll see what's going on here as I moderate the panel. And of course, there's some ambient noise, and there's a little intro from the person who, Maura, the dear Maura, who runs the workshop room there. And a big shout out and thank you to Sridhar, who is the producer and creator of Bhakti Fest, who was kind and gracious enough to entrust me with leading this panel and molding it into this. So I really hope you enjoy it. I sure did. It was a lot of fun to do. Packed house, 1,000 people. Enjoy it.
That we've got Deepak Chopra for a third time today. What a gift. So family, please open your hearts. We have Uttal. We have Deepak Chopra. We have our beloved Shiva Rea. We have Zach Leary. And everybody, we've got Sridhar over here, the founder. Let's give him our love. Are you all ready for an awesome Bhakti Fest panel?
Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Zach Leary, and I'm the host of a podcast called It's All Happening with Zach Leary. And before we actually jump into this magnificent panel, for all of you, who listens to podcasts here? Come on. All right. So obviously the nature of the podcast is it is global. It reaches everybody around the globe. So let's give a big Bhakti Fest shout out to the tens of thousands of people who will listen to this. Yeah. Good stuff, beautiful. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to change course already, and I don't think I need to formally introduce these amazing people on the stage. Shiva Rea, Deepak Chopra, Uttal. Shiva and Jai are, pillars of the Bhakti Fest community, and now, Deepak, you are too, like it or not. And for those of you who are just in the room before for the Lauren Roche Sutra Dram, with Shiva was there, and Dave Stringer, and Deepak, and a lot of mysticism, poetry, and magic, and bhakti can take on many forms. Yoga can take on many forms. But right now, we are going to kind of drop into a little bit more of the jhana form of yoga and kind of get into some knowledge, some wisdom, some philosophy, and things like that. In the format of this panel, many of these questions, in fact, all of these questions were submitted from the various mailing lists and Facebook pages. So these questions were really generated by you. So that's an amazing thing. I will say up front, I have taken poetic license as the moderator of this panel to expand upon them a little bit. So we will do that. We're going to start with the idea of connection. It is so often said, as you hear in the Bhakti paradigm, be here now, we are all one, we are all connected. God is the infinite. It is one, but we give it a million names. That which cannot be named, we give it a million names anyway. But this idea of connection, this idea of collective consciousness, this idea of unity, So the first question kind of begins with this thought, with this, this inner knowing. How do each of you think of the collective consciousness? How do you think the collective consciousness works? And if there is a collective consciousness, meaning how is it that we are all truly connected? Our intuition and our other knowings tells us clearly that we are on a shared information highway. But it seems unfathomable how that works. Ladies first, Shiva Rea.
I was going to defer to Deepak because we've been very grateful for the ways that you're standing near a speaker, or maybe you happen to have the blessing of of these instruments like the tambura that mirror our own spine. So to be, in essence, I believe that our spines are an antenna and that the communication network is, as the traditions that we have been nourishing ourselves from, is one consciousness in a diversity that blows our external mind. So then how this works is something that I'm going to hope that you'll give us the latest evolutionary space. But I can say, as a yogini, since you said ladies first, this experience that we have of our cellular body and how the matrix of life is vibrating within us is what I think is happening as the global revolution of yoga. I really think it's happening in this direct experience. I think it's happening in our cells. And the guidance that we receive, particularly when we're in places where things have broken, as in a hurricane, as in, we were just passing through 9/11. Yeah, in the broken places, we begin to experience that. I think here we can say a sea of love, something that is deeper than what our mind can actually perceive, but we can feel as the cellular reality of being here and now.
There's a great quote by a guy named Terence McKenna that went, "There is a space beyond language, but it's just so damn hard to talk about." But Deepak, you want to, I know you've...
You want to say something?
Well, I'll just approach it from a different perspective. I have not much connection to cosmic consciousness or cellular awareness. In fact, my default imprint is to isolate. But I have found through my life that the more I'm able to soften and open my own heart, the more I see the pain and the joy and the vulnerability and the simple need of others. And because of that, not by an effort on my own part, but it's a natural thing that happens, that you begin to join hearts, and I guess you could say join cells with other people out of compassion and out of just feeling. You know, when you start to feel, then you start to feel others. And once you start to feel others, you feel the connectedness.
And as you were talking, Jai, it really reminds me of the experience of kirtan as a group, Sankirtan. For those of you who have a personal practice at home, I do chanting kirtan in my puja room, alone or with my beloved. It's a very different feeling as it is chanting with Jai, as we did with all thousands of us. You know, something happens when we all chant this mantra.
There's such
together.
a connection.
Yes.
So I'd like to kind of pick up on what was already said, because in the end we all say the same things, but with a different kind of language or different experience of our own life. I resonate with everything you said, and with you as well, Jay. My personal path has been, thanks to my upbringing and training, my path to Gyan Yoga has been through the window of science, even though I don't believe that science is the only way to understand. But if you want to understand reality, there are three levels of experience that we all have. The first level of experience is the one that we're having right now. So in this experience, which is actually a perceptual activity, which we call the physical world, you are experiencing your body, and then you're experiencing other bodies, and you're experiencing what we call the physical world. So this is how Newtonian science looks at physical reality. Objects are separate. We are bodies, therefore we are objects, like any other object. This is an object. This is an object with consciousness. This could be an object in consciousness, but won't go there. So the physical world is largely governed by what we call Newtonian laws, physical laws. And these are the laws of thermodynamics, and these are the laws of gravity, these are the laws of physics and mathematics. And these laws work very well. If you assume that they're the physical world, the laws work well. You apply the principles, you can send a person to the moon, you can land a rover on Mars, and you can drive an automobile, and you can use a plane to go to Sweden or whatever else. So, science works. It gives us these laws, and we use these laws, and we create technology. So that's the first level. But at this level, you and I at least appear to be separate. We are close right now, but we are separate beings, according to this model. And this model is used from everything that we know in modern technology and science. 100 years ago, though, what happened is there was a revolution. There were two revolutions. One is, Einstein's two theories of relativity, and which talked about space-time, matter, information, energy. And then there was another revolution, which we call the quantum revolution. So that quantum revolution and Einstein's insights and insights from others actually gave us a model for saying matter, objects, and energy are the same thing. Every school child now learns E is equal to mc squared. Matter and energy are the same thing. It's the basis of the atomic bomb, amongst other things. So we know that matter and energy are same. But at the level of energy, we're all even technologically connected. We were doing Facebook Live, and people were watching us in South Africa, in Australia, in Zimbabwe, because at the level of energy, we're all connected. It's the basis of all our new technologies, information technologies. So information technologies means the internet, transistors, everything that we assume. It's about 70% of our economy is based on the idea that at the level of energy, we're connected. We're connected. And we're connected at the speed of light. All you have to do is send a text message to somebody, and it goes at the speed of light to wherever they are. Theoretically, if they were on the moon, you'd send a text to the moon, anywhere in the universe, at the speed of light, which has limitations, 300,000 kilometers per second, but not faster, okay? It's very fast, but it's not fast enough, because there are galaxies and planets out there which have exhausted their energy, that don't exist anymore, and they may have burnt out their energy a few billion years ago, and we still see them. They're ghosts, because the light that's coming from there takes millions of years to get from there to here. So when you look at the sky, you're looking at the past. But actually, when you look at me, you're also looking at the past, because it takes a fraction of a second for photons from me to come to you. And if we're doing a Facebook Live, maybe a little longer from me to come to Australia. So this is the second level. But now science has discovered a third level, which is what you guys are talking about without even studying the science. You're already talking about it. So this level of existence that science does not dispute is called non-local. Okay, and it's a very simple idea. Non-local means no location. Okay, no location in space nor time, where everything is not interconnected, but it's inseparable, which means there's no connection, but there's only what all of you call oneness. Okay, this non-low level, originally described by Einstein, I won't go into the history. He suggested it, then he withdrew. He didn't know what to say, because he was a realist. He believed in the real world, which none of us yogis believe in it. Anyway, okay, this is our projection. Okay, but at this level, there's something called entanglement. So we're all entangled with each other in a oneness of existence. And this level is also referred to by some scientists as unmediated, unmitigated, and instantaneous. So let me explain those three words. Unmediated means there's no mediation for my connection with yours. No signal. I have a thought, you have a thought at the same time. I'm thinking of you and you call me on the phone. I feel love in my heart and you feel the same feeling exactly at the same time. Somebody stabs me in the chest, and because you and I are so intimately, spiritually, emotionally connected, you feel the pain, doesn't matter where you are. So it's no mediation. It's no mediation. There's no signal that goes from here to there. It's unmediated, unmitigated. Unmitigated means that the strength of this oneness doesn't diminish with space and time. If I'm in New York and you are in Los Angeles and we are spiritually and emotionally connected, it doesn't matter. I could be in New York, you could be on the moon, or you could be in another galaxy, and the principle would hold true. Unmitigated, which means the robustness, the strength of this connection doesn't diminish with space or time. Past, present, future, all the galaxies, everything that exists in the universe is all one, inseparable existence. So unmediated, unmitigated, instantaneous, and therefore synchronistic. When we experience meaningful coincidences, or we feel support by God, or we feel this state of grace, or we say, I was lucky, or happened to be in the right place at the right time, then you're tapping into this. You're tapping into this. And some of us, not all of us, believe that this is what spirit is, this is what consciousness is, this is where our soul resides. So right now, as you're listening to me, can I do a very simple experiment?
Yeah,
1
please.
second. So you're all listening to me right now, okay? I'm going to ask you a question. Just answer with the word yes. Okay? Will you do that? Okay. Are you aware right now? Okay, now I'm going to ask you the same question. Are you aware right now? Don't answer it till I raise my hand. Okay? Are you aware right now? So are you aware is a thought. It's a mental activity. The answer yes is a thought. But you are in the space between thoughts, and when you're there and I'm there, we are both in the same place.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's inseparable.
Yes.
This is pure being, pure love, where we are connected. Over here, if you drop a thought, it'll ripple across the universe and create miracles for you. This is what the siddhis are in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
It makes me, hearing you describe it like this, and especially at the beginning when setting it up with Einstein's theory of relativity, it kind of makes me think, especially in the atmosphere that we're in now, that many of the ancient rishis, when they were creating the Upanishads and sort of making friends with cities and trying to articulate them, were onto something.
Yes.
that is just now coming to fruition in the scientific world, right? Because we're able to prove what they were onto, like non-dualism and Vedanta. Jai?
Now, I want to say one more thing, which you mentioned, which is very beautiful, actually. Solitude is not the same thing as loneliness. Okay?
No.
Loneliness comes from fear, and loneliness separates us. But when you're in that domain, which I mentioned, awareness, you can go in there anywhere, anytime. As you're listening to me, you can just be aware of that which is listening. That's true connectivity. Solitude is being plugged into the entire intelligence of the universe. So that's what Tagore, the great sage, said. He said, I'm alone, but I'm also with everyone. It's not the same as loneliness. It's actually being connected. You're not unplugging, you're plugging into the cosmic computer.
I had an experience about the rippling. And it was, I love my Apple products and my iPhones and all that stuff. And several years ago, when Steve Jobs died, I received an email from somebody that I didn't know, and he said, I wanted to tell you that you changed the course of our lives. And I said, I wrote back and I said, how do you mean? He said, well, it was in 1972, and you had just come back from India with your guru, from being with your guru, Neem Karoli Baba, and you came and gave a concert at Reed College. My friend, Steve, and I were at your concert, and we came backstage and chatted with you after the show. And you told us about your experiences with Neem Karoli Baba. So 3 weeks later, we went to India to see Maharaji. And though we didn't meet him, Steve and my lives were completely altered. And I thought, that is so amazing, because just everything we do, every step, every movement, every thought, every word that we say ripples farther, way farther than our own awareness of it. And that makes me want to act
buy a new iPhone
in a good way.
But again, what you're describing is not at the level of thought. What you got a transmission at the level of presence. Neem Karoli Baba's presence was the transmission, not a thought.
And it's I always like to point out, but especially on my podcast, that it's a good way to remind yourself if you look at technology or the proliferation of cyberspace in the digital age as a threat, remember the roots of it. Cyberspace and the internet age was started by the acid heads. It was started by us. It was started by the yogis. And look it up, do your homework, and it's a fascinating footnote into it. We're going to go on to, and this is, it's not dissimilar to what
Shall we keep this sequence here? You want to change it? Anything about this?
I think we're...
Are you okay with
I think it's working.
being the first one always?
It's not self-determined. Everything is possible.
Maybe.
And let's see, and the next question, actually...
Maybe we should ask Zach questions.
You can. Well, the next question, speaking of irony here, it came from one of our friends on the internet. What is your view on free will? Do we really have free will? And in the paradigm of the collective consciousness and of being all one, what is your view on free will? So it is your free will to whoever wants to answer this question.
Well, it's an unanswerable question. In my case, I'll just say that my guru told me that he holds the key to my mind. And I'll just surrender into that.
Well, as I understand it, free will, what the West calls free will, the East calls karma. So there is a little, you need to understand what karma is. Karma, the word in Sanskrit, karma means action or some experience that you've had. So any experience you've had, it conditions your mind, right? You have a cup of coffee, you like it, then you go to Starbucks and you keep repeating it and you become a coffee addict. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but that's karma. Karma is the conditioning of the mind through personal experiences, through society, through culture, through history, through economics, through what your religion was, what your parents told you. And today, actually, we can look at epigenetics as karma. Epigenetics is how your genes are influenced by your conditioned mind, which you didn't really have anything to do with at the superficial level. Although at the deeper level, we have everything to do with everything. But at the superficial level, you didn't have anything to do with your conditioning. It was already taken care of you by your parents, your ancestors, your genes, your epigenetics, your religion, your history, your economics, and all of that. Given that, the Vedanta would say there's no free will for 99.9999% of us because we are imprisoned by karma, by our conditioned mind. But we have the ability to free ourselves from karma if we become aware of our conditioned mind. Because you're not the mind, you're the awareness which was conditioned into this mind. So beyond all the secret passages and the dark alleys and the ghost-filled attics of your mind, there's something called pure consciousness, which is infinite, which is timeless.
And it goes on with and without you.
Huh?
It goes on with or without you.
It goes on with or without your conditioned mind. But you're connected to it because every time you have a thought, you have to go there. Right now, every time I'm speaking, I'm not actually thinking about what I'm saying. I'm going back to beyond my conditioned mind to express my views because I have observed my mind. You know, as Krishnamurti, we used to say, the highest intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself, and slowly transformation occurs, and slowly karma dissolves. So what Rumi says, why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? Well, you stay in prison because you can't see the door. It's invisible. It's in your mind. So I would say yes, the goal of our existence is free will. It's called moksha, total freedom. Total freedom is called moksha. But that's what we're all seeking. And along the way, we are imprisoned by determinism or karma.
Shiva?
I have to admit, I'm in a kind of state of reverie up here. Because I love Jai so much. And I can't believe I've never been this close to you. And
thank you.
And I just want to share something that has helped me, is the tantric, as my small understanding, but it has helped me, is this invocation of Ichcha Shakti. It really, I think, is a different, perhaps, understanding of will, and that every aspect of nature has Ichcha Shakti. It's something that is arising, and it has a primal intelligence, it has a primal alignment. It's why we love seeing animals and children and elders when they are in a way, this expression of this natural occurrence and natural desire. And then, of course, the Jnana Shakti, and then the Ichcha Shakti, Jnana Kriya Shakti. That there is something that we begin to feel, and I think all of the attunement practices of yoga, all the forms of meditation, we can feel it in japa. We can feel when there becomes a flow that we would gladly surrender this free will, if we think of as pushing that we're doing in the world and exercising and destroying what's in our path with that free will. And there's something else that's arising that as I just try and bring my heart and my embodied intelligence to feel that, it's like we can feel a through way, perhaps, that is a more refined understanding of this circle of will and surrender, and how this actually becomes expressed in the fact that culturally we're at a time where rising requires for some like jumper cables. You know, that our Ichcha Shakti, this primal sense that it's time to rise or time to be in action, is kind of in a state of trauma, in a state of despair, and a state of sleeping. So there's some art to aligning ourselves with Ichcha Shakti.
There's
So
an art
I'd like to
awareness.
comment on that.
Yeah.
So these are three important words: Ichcha Shakti, Gyan Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. So the word Shakti, of course, means the divine feminine. Ichha, the exact translation from Sanskrit, is subtle desire or subtle intention. Like a sutra is a subtle intention. So Ichcha Shakti is spontaneous knowingness and spontaneous intention and spontaneous thinking, which means you without anticipation, without memory, without karma, without regrets, you spontaneously have the right thought. And it's the right thought because it's not coming from your conditioned mind, because it's coming from the divine mind. That's Ichha Shakti. Spontaneous fulfillment of desire. Gyan Shakti, Gyan means knowledge, it's spontaneous knowingness. So it's spontaneous knowledge, which is not like looking up something in Wikipedia or the Encyclopedia Britannica. You just know, and we also call it intuition. Intuition is, in a way, Gyan Shakti, because it's a form of intelligence that is, first of all, it doesn't have a win-lose orientation. Secondly, it's not linear. Thirdly, it's contextual. Fourthly, it's kind of eavesdropping on the divine mind. So that's Gyan Shakti. And Kriya Shakti is spontaneous right action, as opposed to karma. So Kriya Shakti overrides karma. These are very beautiful phrases that mean a lot, for which there aren't really good English words. So, Kriya Shakti is spontaneous knowingness, Kriya Shakti is spontaneous right action, and Ichha Shakti is spontaneous desire, which is evolutionary, which takes you all the way to the divine.
And
great words.
Amazing words, and the power of Sanskrit, really does focus so much on. Yes.
The only thing is they're not considered words.
I was going to say the power of Sanskrit are energetic properties that are beyond the words. Beyond. I did want to say something about the conditioned mind really quick. Do you guys know the story? I forget his name. He was one of Christopher Columbus's right-hand henchmen or something. But when the 3 boats landed in the West Indies, and his diaries, they're actually public, part of what happened when these boats landed in the West Indies was, all of these Native Americans were there. They had no conditioned mind for what a boat of that size was. Therefore, they did not see it on the horizon. They did not see it coming. And all of a sudden, these men with swords and armor were standing right in front of them because they had no conditioned mind for what the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria were. So, interesting metaphor for thinking about the conditioned mind, for thinking about the conceptualization of all of these things.
Before your conditioning, all you experience is like a Rorschach chart, like a energy soup. It's your conditioned mind that converts the energy soup into the idea of a body in the world. And beyond the energy soup is actually pure consciousness, is God, the divine mind.
So, in regards to free will, I'm just curious what you feel about the concept or the idea of divine intervention or divine grace, an energy that may, out of mercy, come down and change the course of one's karma.
What? And you said Maharaji had the keys to your mind, and so
say that again.
Maharaji had the keys to your mind.
Yeah.
Did he? What was that?
But that's a kind of a very interesting paradox, that you surrender to Maharaj as the divine mind, and in doing that surrender, you connect to the divine mind, because Maharaj is the conduit channeling that divine mind to you. So, in a way, you're giving up your free will to access the infinite possibilities of the creative divine mind. So it's a combination of surrender, but still there must be a subtle intention. If you didn't have that subtle intention, since you guys are all experts in Sanskrit, even intention has 4 levels: para, pashanti, madhyama, vaikari. So there's
I'm
lots of...
I'm not an expert in anything.
No, but you guys here are. There are intentions that you have that you're not aware of, and which you'll only become aware of if you still your mind.
The younger people who, not that we need to label anybody or put them in a class of a generation, but the United States Department of Labor says 60% of all kids in elementary school today will work in a profession that has yet to exist. So that the implication there is their relationship with connection, their relationship with, or lack of connection, their relationship with, how technology fuses all of these things together. But the question here reads, how do we help our children and adolescents become equipped or better equipped for looking at the rest of the world with empathy and to find connection with others and peace within themselves? So I think kind of directing this towards young people, because there's no question the fabric of our planet, the fabric of our culture, of our society is changing at the fastest rate it ever has, well, certainly within the last 100 years. So let's talk about the kids today.
Well,
I think we all have a passion. So, Jai, your lips were like something was coming out.
Well, our son turned 13 recently.
Oh, wow.
And, from the moment he was born, actually, from before he was born, well, he was inside of his mother, Nubia. He was surrounded and has been surrounded by prayer and by devotion and by good intention and by mantra and dance and music and love. When he was born, I actually found myself worshiping him as baby Gopala, as my Krishna. As he's grown up, my feelings towards him haven't changed. But he, of course, he used to love to do japa with me, and he would always sit in my lap while I was doing kirtan. Now he has his own rock and roll band, and he's not opposed to what we do, but he's not as interested. But I have such a deep faith in the trajectory of his soul, because I don't know what he's going to do or how he's going to do it, but I know that he has experienced consistently unconditional love and emotional safety. And to me, that's the gift, that's the best equipment we could give him for life. I encourage him to practice his music, and he does sometimes and doesn't sometimes. I encourage him to put more effort into his homework, and he does sometimes and he doesn't sometimes. But the thing is that he knows he is a human being of great, great, great worth, and and the rest remains to be seen.
I'd like all of us for a moment to pause and think of a young person in your life who is in any place of despair or going through a hard time. Does everybody have anybody in your life who is in that space? I think of Ariana, who's a counselor at a high school. My son is now 20, and he went through a whole initiation of death and going through depression, and what is happening to the youth today is not that different than what was happening when I was born in '67, and Berkeley was raging. My father was going to UC Berkeley, and I'm always grateful for that transmission, because I think the youth have this altruism, and what's happening at the macro scale, I can't imagine. We all had our thing that made us feel that there was no future, but climate change combined with our current political change, and this main thing that I'd like all of us to think about is the somatic change of technology that we and our homes, because I know you wanted to ask us to think of practical things, like how can we, for me, the simplest thing is I just think we need to apply the science that we already know about our circadian rhythms. I think we need to help young people deal with this somatic insult to their natural intelligence that has been going on, and to find places where we can re-engage the yogas that we all know about, the fact that meditation is happening in schools is so powerful. So the fact that you could volunteer in a school, I did through my son's elementary school, and then there's something that happens junior high and high school where these resources and there's these gaps. There need to be places where, what happened to the raves? They should just be like PE raves or something with, you know what I mean? Like there's something where we need to catch up with how powerful the free things that young people can do to re-engage. Not so much that maybe it's through thing, but I think what I hear from my son is that festivals are the place where the somatic experience of this enlivening, we're social creatures, and so the music and the chanting and the yoga and the breathing is re-enlivening, and going back, it's just not so satisfying. So there's something of Icha Shakti that is rising, and I feel we should, if you're in any place of influence, at your school, how can we make changes to support youth's health, at mental health, physical health, social health? And I think everyone in the room, and personally, we're actively engaged with this.
Yes.
It's something called Flow for All. We're making music. I know you have both been involved in this with kids, with Kirtan Kids, making music that has this effect on our neural pathways, giving many alternate forms of meditation so that these tools are available everywhere.
Yes. Good stuff.
And Shiva, just one very small thing. You said those of us who are in positions of influence, and I think we should all remember that every single one of us is in a position of influence.
That's what I mean. That's really what I mean. But I mean, it's not that you're in a position where you can create influence where you are. Where you are.
Yes.
It may seem small, just look in your neighborhood or look just to your school.
Deepak, before you add to this, I've kind of changed my tune on this. I mean, I was always kind of personally struggling with the lack of mysticism in the modern world. It's like, oh my God, what's happened to the mystical experience? We're all in front of these screens all the time, and it's short attention span theater and stuff like that. But like Shiva was saying, Bhakti Fest is a special place. I'm not saying there are tons of others like it, but there are a lot of festivals in America. There are a lot of tribal gatherings. There are a lot of us getting together and dancing around the fire and praising the divine in many, many, many forms. And it's pretty inspiring. But Deepak, young people.
I've kind of agonized about this for many years, and this is what I'd like to share. We cannot stop evolution, either biological evolution or the evolution of consciousness. It's just the way nature is. Nature evolves from primitive life forms to complexities and ultimately huge complexities in consciousness. And so part of that evolution is technology. And when I came to this country, I'd never seen a TV set in my life. The first time I saw a television set was in New Jersey, in color. And I didn't know what the heck was, these people inside a box. And then, if I had to make a phone call, I had to go to a booth and do a collect call or whatever. And then, I saw the first fax machines. I saw the internet. I saw email. Somebody told me in the future you can send movies by fax. I thought that was a miracle enough, and now you can go in iTunes or wherever, you can click and you saw any movie you want. You can't stop this. You cannot stop technology. It's part of our evolution. And so if you think you're going to stop it, you're going to be irrelevant. Darwin's principle. If you don't adapt, we become irrelevant. So technology is neutral. What we do with it is dependent on our state of consciousness.
Yes.
So right now, if you go on the internet, sure, it represents the human condition. Everything from trolls to violence, ignoring climate change, social injustice, economic injustice, war, terrorism, eco-destruction. You see the human condition just by Google. All you have to do is that. So what is our responsibility? Our responsibility is to bring the divine into the technology.
Yes.
And we do that right, we can create technology will be our means to a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Now people are talking about VR, they're talking about augmented reality,
AI.
but the fact is we're already in a virtual reality, okay? And all these are just extensions of our consciousness, and it's amazing, spontaneous, evolutionary creativity, which is, when we think of God, we say creator. Right? Why? Because God is the ultimate creator. So our creativity is an aspect of that. But it can be diabolical. It can destroy the world, it can save the world. And so my plea to you is engage in technology. Tweet these things. Put them on Facebook. Put them on Instagram. Put them everywhere. Communicate with other people. Send them love through the internet. You can give somebody in Zimbabwe a dopamine hit right now, and all you have to do, all you have to do is send them an emoticon with a kiss or a hug, and here is a dopamine surge in somebody in South Africa. So, let's use technology to create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, joyful world.
Where's my phone? I need my phone right now.
But it is, just to echo on that, it is an absolute miracle that tens of thousands of people, no matter their borders, their economic conditions, or whatever, can get access to this talk today.
By the way, that's leading us to the knowledge that there are no borders. 5 years ago, I asked 100 physicists, because, physicists fight among themselves, just like scientists, doctors, they all fight amongst themselves. They can't agree on anything. So I asked these physicists, I said, I'll do a book for you, I'll edit a book for you, and these are prominent physicists. If you can all agree on one thing, just tell me what that one thing was. And you know what they said? There are no boundaries in the universe. Every boundary is a notion. Every boundary is a false perception. If we just know that one thing, there are no boundaries, then we use technology to get there.
That's right. Yeah. Do you guys know about the astronaut effect? About people, it's been said 70 to 80% of all astronauts that have been to space come back, and they are blown away at this idea, because most of them are, they
Next week, I'm doing a podcast, talk about a podcast with an Iranian woman astronaut.
Amazing.
And I don't know how many of you know, but there are a lot of women astronauts in the world, and not necessarily from America.
Yes.
So she is Iranian, and she has created a club of women astronauts who have experienced that oneness that you're talking about.
Wow. So a person of age, they're 18 years old, they wrote this question. I look around the world and I see so much strife, conflict, and ignorance. It makes me cynical that I feel no matter how much love I surround myself with, I'm not sure if it matters. Does it? I am a yogi, age 18, and I'm struggling with this idea. So I think it's kind of lovely that somebody 18 took the time to write us for this. But anyone? Shiva, you want to start with that?
Shiva.
Well, I think it's the same echo in Mother Teresa when she was asked that question. It's the same thing about any action we do. Is she says, yes, but it would be one less drop in the ocean, this act of compassion. I think that kind of despair when you're 18 is part of a metamorphosis. And I think bhakti is part of that metamorphosis, where we see, like, if our lens are in one way, we see that everybody, as you say, seems to be attending the boundary that actually doesn't exist. And I wanted to say one thing about the word boundary, is I think that respect is different than boundary. And that I think we need to start just in a way for boundaries, describing that if we have mutual respect, there's something how we can share this boundless space together. And it feels that this is part of what we see kind of dissolving in the world, is a sense of respect where you do have that sense. I know you've all are global citizens, or just even you in your own neighborhood, and you have these interactions where someone transforms your day. Sometimes they're an elder, or sometimes my favorite rascals were on Beale Street in Memphis, and I'd be late to work at the Blues Club, and these old guys, they would just have this way of saying, "Hey, Shiva, keep it up, honey." Just like one, and it would change my whole day. And if I didn't see them, do you know what I mean? So I think that when you're 18, you hope that the revolution goes all the way to the White House and it stays there. And it's quite disheartening when we see that can't there just be basic human things that are beyond politics? But yeah, we're all involved in the butterfly effect, and I was hoping that, because I've really wanted to ask someone like you also, this thing of how we're all breathing molecules of all the beings that have ever existed.
Yeah, right now in your body there are 1 million atoms that were once in the body of Christ, or Buddha, or Moses, unfortunately also in the body of Hitler and other people. So we are the same atoms recycling. We're the same information recycling. Information recycles and then evolves. Energy recycles, then it evolves. But most importantly, consciousness, which is souls, every soul is recycling on a cosmic journey to enlightenment. And so every child that is born is already wise. I mean, what Tagore, we mentioned Tagore, he said every child that is born is proof that God has not yet given up on human beings. So children are the way to get in touch with the divine. And if they get attention, which means they're heard, if they get appreciation, which means they're noticed for the strengths they have, if they get affection, which means they're given what you gave them, unconditional love, and if they get acceptance, which means you don't try to mold them into your idea of music, total acceptance, then they blossom and they unfold with spontaneous creativity. So what actually is happening is souls are not only recycling, but they're also recycling the conditioned mind, the cultural mind, and all of that. And so epigenetically, they come partly, there are many kinds of karma, as you know, prarabdha karma, sanchit karma, on and on. But the fact is, there are karmic boundaries that souls come into the world with. But if they are given this total nurturing, they override that and they evolve into higher beings. So every one of us is evolving to that higher being, but some of us are maybe because of circumstances, karmic, epigenetic, it's slow. And in other places it's faster. But evolution is unstoppable anyway. So I wouldn't worry about the future of humanity. When all this settles down, the dust settles down, this will be seen as a phase transition. When water becomes steam, it boils, and there's turbulence. So now humanity is going through a phase transition. There's a lot of turbulence, and soon we'll be on another journey, another trajectory altogether. At least that's what I think.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the last phase.
I just want to go back a little bit to the 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And it seems such a tender, vulnerable question.
It really was, yeah.
And I don't think it's unique to an 18-year-old. I think it's a question, a moment, many moments that come to us all through our lives, where we feel we feel so much love, and then we feel an impotence, and we see pain everywhere. And is the love that we feel, are the actions that we are enacting, are they actually helping? And then, it isn't so hard to become cynical and to become hardened. And I would say to that 18-year-old boy, the same way I would say to myself at 67, Jai, remember a time when you were feeling down, separate, despairing, and someone gave you their love. And even deeper, remember a time when you were feeling lost and you gave yourself love. And the huge difference that made in your being. So I would say to him, remember that, and don't give up on your kindness and your intention and your prayer for the good, the well-being of everyone. And sometimes, of course, it looks very bleak. But in the times when it looks bleak is the times that we have to try to shine even brighter. Because everyone has a tender heart that is in need of caring.
Yes. And that need for caring, and that, we're here at Bhakti Fest because we want to engage in practices that optimize our chances for experiencing this caring, for experiencing this love on a daily basis and integrating it into our lives. We are here because we have a deep need to seek more in our own lives and in the world at large. So the last portion of this discussion, I wanted to talk a little bit about integration. Loosely, I guess we can maybe use the metaphor of what happens when you step off the mat. When Jai sings the closing prayer of the kirtan, and we do the kajais, like what happens after that about integration. So the question here, you have each had the privilege to spend time with some true masters of yoga and possess within them a certain degree of mastership, and that's even found within yourself. Degrees and certifications aside, what deeper qualities would you say differentiate genuine teachers from the masses and authors and instructors of the world, and how we might best go about developing these qualities within ourselves? So, that question had a lot going on there, but about nurturing the guru within us and what happens when we step off the mat and taking these practices into the Starbucks, into the traffic light, for all of you, I think most of us are from Southern California or close to Los Angeles, the great LA yoga of traffic, I am a terrible representative of Bhakti yoga when I'm driving on the 405. I'm the worst. I seek not to be. But let's talk about integration for a second. Deepak, let's start with you. Integration.
As a physician, I learned, my training was in neuroscience, endocrinology. So I learned about the three brains that we have. We have a reptilian brain, which is responsible for our survival. All reptiles have this response, fight or flight or freeze, when they're threatened. So it was our reptilian brain, 300 million years old, that resulted in our survival, because we were able to take care of predators. Either we were eaten or we killed them. Then the second brain that we have is called the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain. And the emotional brain is only found in mammals. Mammals are so called because of the word mama, mother, mater, etc. So unlike reptiles, mammals, all of us are mammals, but there are many mammals out there. They don't lay eggs, they make babies, but they also touch each other, they cuddle, they coo, they kiss, they play, they sing, and they form very close emotional bonds, and they even exchange their genes through this intimate, physical, emotional connection. It's our limbic brain. It's our emotional brain that controls our biological responses. And then we have a third, that's only 100 million years old. Then we have a third brain, which is only 4 million years old. We call it the intellectual brain, which is responsible for our thinking, reflecting, everything that we call modern society, architecture, science, etc. But the cortical brain, or this intellectual brain, is only 4 million years old. So most of the time we are reacting to emotions and to basically survival needs. Integration means that all three brains work together. So you only use your reptilian brain if you're in a life-threatening situation. Your house is burning, you need to run. Okay? As the Buddha said, find out later who lit the match, and even later, find out later who produced the matchstick. But right now, run. Okay? So that's the best use of the reptilian brain. Danger, survival. The best use of the emotional brain is what we call love, compassion, joy, equanimity, peace, which moves us in the direction of what scientists call homeostasis or self-regulation. If, on the other hand, you're feeling fear and anger and hostility and guilt and shame and depression, then your body goes into inflammation. Okay? The intellectual brain has very little to do with anything we do. We pretend that we're using it, but we don't. Okay? And the best way to use it is through reflective self-inquiry. So an integrated brain is you're using all three. But if you really want to go deep into the nature of reality, then, the Vedanta would say, forget all this. True integration comes from knowing who you are and not confusing yourself with the modulations of yourself that you call mind, body, universe. And this brings the 5 kleshas, not knowing true identity, clinging, grasping, fear of impermanence, identifying with the ego, and fear of death, which are all connected, intimately connected to the first klesha. You don't know who you are. You're confusing yourself with your self-image.
However, just to kind of put this in perspective here, but the quest of wanting to know who you are.
Yes, it's a human quest.
But it's not an illusion once I figure out what I think I am. Do you think so? It's an illusion?
I think once you figure it out, you realize your infinite possibilities. You're one with God. There's nothing else to do than to surrender to that process and let it evolve. Kriya Shakti, Ichha Shakti, Gyan Shakti, all by itself.
But what about this idea of embracing Dharma? So I don't think my Dharma is necessarily like, this is who I am, but you're a great example. I mean, you have a life that is very pronounced. You do this thing that affects millions of people around the world.
But even Dharma evolves. See, so my Dharma I thought was being a doctor. Then I figured out it's not really being a doctor, it should be a healer. So then I went into mind-body medicine, and I said, healer is not enough. I want to know reality. And so it evolves. Dharma in the beginning is your life purpose as a person.
Yes.
Dharma later is aligning the elements and forces within you with the elements and forces of the universe. And ultimate dharma is enlightenment for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, Jaya or Shiva, we originally were talking about what happens off the mat or away from the harmonium, but we jumped into Dharma here and purpose and our roles and all of that.
I don't know that I can add anything to what you just said. Except just, as human beings...
His smile says it all, right?
Yes. It really does, and not just metaphorically, but it really does.
I find that as human beings, we take 2 steps forward and often then take 1 step backwards, 2 steps forward, and we have to look with the long view and do our best.
And in some cases, we become heads of state and say 60 years backward.
Yeah.
Shiva, for you.
Because I had the chance to live in Kenya, it's a place where you get to feel deep time. And particularly when you're like in Tsavo and you see the rhythm of the wild elephant's ears. And I became awake to the metaphor that the tantric body, when they describe our body as a fire altar, and that there were in all of our ancestors these places that we gathered around and that we looked up and looked horizontally, and it was a regular part of our life, such as in the core of Vedic tantric bhakti, is to see the sunrise, to see the sunset, and to listen at those times, and that there's a kind of an anchor in the sacred of nature. And that when I feel the most dissonance, when I feel her covered up, when I can't look up where I am and see the moon or know where I am, and I feel there's some rhythm that is on top of this, which is so grounding for us, and that we've passed through an intense evolution and we're still in it. And so the way that I try and live yoga is by feeling that this barometer within me is just like a fire that we see and we get very quiet, and is maybe that we've been at least able to cultivate for 2 million years or so. So for a long time, this metaphor of gazing at the fire and just practically seeing when it's going out and it's growing dim, it needs our attention. Whether it's our children or it's our septic tank, but really it's our rivers, it's the ocean, it's climate change. But to somehow not take on, as Rumi describes, don't move the way fear moves, because we'll lose contact with a deeper rhythm, and that we can feel this fire keeping in ourselves. When we have that alignment of will and wisdom, then it's almost like on, yes, there. And whether it's a small action or something, we get this feedback in ourselves that it's off. And particularly as you described inflammation, we're heading into a time where the fires of change are going to be rapid and intense. So we need to every day take all the small fires and be good fire keepers. Not inflame them in our body, not inflame them in our households or in our relationships, because that also ripples out. So for me, fire keeping really helps me, and particularly with our heart. For me, when I start to feel my heart dimming, then that to me is like the main signal, this main bhakti signal, to really be more sincere in the nutrients that are available around. So I think we're all fire keepers, and I hope that the Bhakti Fest lights your fire.
Yeah. So, hearing you talk, Shiva, it really had me think about the nature of the ego. Somebody wrote here, why do I always hear to calm the ego, to lose the ego? But lately I've read that you need the ego because that is trusting your inner self. So as my question is losing your ego necessarily a must in the process of bhakti or Zen or Buddhism? That's the question here on paper. But it really, it had me thinking a lot about that. And what Deepak, what you said before about the illusion of who we actually are or what we actually are. But even so, if I am temporarily identified with this thing I call Zach, and I need this ego in order to communicate what it is I feel is worthy or righteous or something like that. But what is the nature of the ego in this paradigm of science and kind of cosmic divinity that you speak of?
So the ego is the basis of your personality. And your body is basically a projection of your ego, as is your experience of the world is a projection of the ego. And we, of course, all identify with our ego because it is our provisional identity. It is our provisional identity. It's not our absolute identity. What I mean by provisional is this identity that we call the ego is evolving. And as it evolves from separation to unity, from fear to love. And I don't think as long as you're in a body that you can be totally devoid of ego. So the main thing is let it not dominate your experience of life. Let it be in the background. Let in the foreground be that which we call awareness, even the awareness of the ego. You don't fight the ego because that's the ultimate melodrama of the ego. When you say, I want to get rid of my ego, it's your ego that's saying, I want to get rid of my ego. So you can't do it. It's impossible. All you can do is observe it. And the way you observe it is that the ego localizes you. It squeezes you into the volume of this body and the span of your lifetime. So ego makes you very local. Your real nature is unbounded, eternal, timeless, non-local, spaceless, Mahadakash, Chitakash, whatever you want to call it. The space is permeated with this consciousness across all of the fabric of space-time. But as long as you're in your body, then this is it. And this is the projection of the ego. So when your ego goes out of balance, all you have to do is feel your body. And you'll feel tight. We call these people uptight. Okay? Or medically speaking, tight sphincters. Everything is tight. Everything is tight. So
too much mulabandha.
If you can't sleep at night, if you have constipation, if you have irritable bowel, if your muscles are tight, it's ego. Okay, just let it go. Watch it, let it go, feel the tightness, and keep feeling it till it dissolves. Don't fight it. Embrace it as a sensation in your body. Because ego concept is too abstract, right? A conditioned mind, this kind of conditioning, personality, what the heck is it? Well, it's a socially induced hallucination, but it's a convincing hallucination. So when you observe the tightness in your body, and you don't fight it, just observe it, soon the body will relax. And that's where yoga, yoga nidra, pranayam, pratyahara, yogasana, all of these things help.
The final question I want to ask is, having the three of you on stage together like this, it makes me selfishly want to know one thing I can do every day. Just one thing I could do every day. Jai first.
Well, Zach, it depends on what you want to do.
To better my spiritual condition.
You know, I know what I would answer you if you were interested in singing and devotional yoga, but I don't exactly know what your particular path is. So I would just say, if there's one thing, just one thing that you could do each day would be to show an act of kindness to some other person.
Good answer. Deepak.
Okay, before I answer the question, I want to do a little promo. Since everybody was promoting something, I want to promote something. So please go online and check out this website. It's called ISHAR, online.org. So ISHAR stands for Integrative Studies and Historical Archives for all things that we're trying to learn together right now. This is a library that the Chopra Foundation started, and we haven't promoted it because it wasn't ready. It's ready right now. It's free, and you can find anything that you want on meditation and the research, on epigenetics, on neuroplasticity, 65,000 academic papers on everything that we guys are interested in. Okay? And this is how we want to use technology, okay, to create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthy world. But one of the reasons I'm saying this right now is I asked our librarian and our director, who's a cultural anthropologist from MIT, he's an MD, he's a PhD, I said, I want to know from you if there's any connection to inflammation in the body, 95% of all chronic disease, and what's happening in our collective consciousness. And I wanted to do all the research on this, and they spent 2 years doing this research, and this is what they found. And I want everyone to know this, that if you look across the world, the number one human condition today is low-grade anxiety and low-grade depression. 99% of humanity suffers from low-grade anxiety. Low-grade means they don't know what they're anxious about. They're just a free-floating, low-grade, total anxiety. And then it also leads to low-grade depression, and that's a marker for inflammation in the body, which you can measure, low-grade inflammation, not acute inflammation. So if I injure myself, and I get a bruise, that's an acute inflammation that protects me. It protects me from bleeding to death. But there's something called low-grade inflammation that leads to 95% of disease in our world. 95. Only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant, which means they predict the disease. For that, they're doing all kinds of research, gene technology, CRISPR, editing, etc. But the rest is related to a low-grade anxiety that comes from feeling separate. And therefore, our number one task as a civilization is to get rid of this low-grade anxiety through the opposite of what is anxiety or fear, which is love, of course. So this is the true mission, I think, of all of us at Bhakti Fest and everywhere else. So please check this website, isharonline.org. It's a free service. And I wanted to mention this. Now, what should we do as a daily practice? I think I have mine, and mine is I do my reflective meditation. I'll take you through that this evening. Supposedly, I'm doing a meditation. But I also introduce 4 intentions every day into my body-mind system. The first is joyful, energetic body. Second is loving, compassionate heart. The third is reflective, alert mind. And the fourth, and most important, is lightness of being. And as long as I do that, I'm all set.
Shiva.
Thank you so much. As you said that, it helped me focus on one thing and also 3 tiny points. If we bring our hands overhead in Jaya Mudra. For the low-grade anxiety, I want to invite you tomorrow morning from 8 to 10. We're going for 108 pranams. And you could be in a hospital bed. You could be overcoming anything. If you can move your arms, then as we exhale, we go down to the earth. And so that's a full prostration, but you can just move your hands in front of you. And then for the depression, as you come back up, stand up, rise up. Take your arms back up. So if you couldn't lift your arms, you can bow. You could bow. Let's bring our hands to our heart. You can just bow to your heart. And then you can begin to lift your spine and open your chest. And those two movements are the pulsation of consciousness, the unmesha, nimesha. And it's, as a kind of movement anthropologist, it's my thesis that we got off the Bhakti origins of yoga because we all learned chaturanga, but we never went down into prostration. No, I mean, just consider it.
Yeah.
We're stuck at a hamkara level because we thought we'd just go from there to upward dog. But if you go from chaturanga and you go down to the earth, the ahamkara surrenders into the buddhi, into the wisdom. And then there we receive any anxiety that we're feeling now. However you can get down. Like James Brown. And the part of it is however long you stay down there, and particularly tomorrow we'll be with the Mayapuris. You're all welcome. All musicians of Bhakti Fest are welcome to join us. And it's going to be at the Hanuman stage
what time
from
is
8
that?
to 10.
Oh, sorry.
I know. And it'll be at the Hanuman stage, but also for the UN International Peace Day. It's a time when you can feel many global meditations going on. And the thing, art of pranam, is that it's for everyone. So I think that's simple enough, but you can also ask yourself 3 things as we wake up. Can I breathe more today? Of the 21,600 breaths I receive, could I breathe more fully, more presently? Did I love all that I can today? We can always make more space for that kindness. And of course, we're in this transition, as Deepak Ji said, towards renewable energy. And how can we support that great shift to a green future for all?
Shiva, thank you. Deepak, thank you. Thank you. Let them have it.